Neil and how he pressured me into having sextuplets. It all started when we were watching a reality TV show about a girl who was raising her quadruplets. People loved the show, and the girl was making millions of dollars. After watching a few episodes, my boyfriend Neil said to me, "Hey, if this girl got a TV show because she had quadruplets, why don't you get pregnant with quintuplets? We would have one more kid than her and therefore become even more famous and rich." Okay, becoming rich and famous was the worst reason to have kids. I told him he was crazy. I mean, I wasn't ready to start a family and I never wanted lots of children. Maybe 1 or 2. But he kept going on about how having 5 children would change our lives for the better. My boyfriend Neil just didn't seem to care about my feelings. Did he really think I wanted to be pregnant with 5 babies inside my belly? I'm only a couple of inches over 5 feet, while Neil is 6 feet tall. Where were all those babies going to fit? And if we were going to have quintuplets, I'd have to have in vitro fertilization. That's a very painful process where the doctors take eggs out of my ovaries to fertilize them and to put them back into me. It's painful, expensive, and without any guarantee of success. I told him that there was no way I would ever do that. But Neil just ignored me and continued to pressure me into having quintuplets, saying that all would be fine once we were rich and famous. But I don't think it's good for children to grow up with cameras following them all the time. I want my babies to have a normal childhood. And why would any TV crew want to film us anyway? We're just ordinary people. I tried to laugh it off as another one of Neil's stupid ideas, but he begged me for months to have quintuplets, and I began to wonder if maybe it was a good idea after all. I mean, having a big family might be great, and the government gives financial support for each child, so we'd be able to afford to take care of them. Well, one night, I had a dream where I told my boyfriend Neil that I wanted to have quintuplets. It seemed so real and so right. I figured it was my subconscious telling me we should go for it. So the next morning, I told Neil I was ready to become pregnant with quintuplets. He started cheering and got all excited and promised me that this was the best decision I've ever made. But when we went to the fertility doctor and told him about our plans, he warned us that multiple births were very dangerous, both for the mother and for her babies. That's why he refused to help us. But that didn't stop my boyfriend from finding another doctor who we had to pay extra money to implant 12 fertilized eggs into my ovaries. The problem is that in vitro fertilization doesn't always work, so we didn't know how many of the fertilized eggs would survive. It could have been 0, but it could also have been 10, leaving me with decuplets. You can imagine how scared I was that something would go wrong, but at least I had Neil by my side. He told me that in the end, the only thing that mattered was that we were together. But after 2 weeks, I could feel I was pregnant, but I still didn't know how many babies I had in my tummy. We still had to wait for our 12-week ultrasound. When the big day came, the doctor took a very close look. He wanted to make sure he wasn't missing a baby, but after 20 minutes of looking at the monitor, he told us he was seeing 5 heartbeats, and we were expecting quintuplets. My boyfriend and I immediately started screaming out of joy. Everything was going perfect and as planned. And then, things got really bad. After a few months, my belly got so big that all I could do was lay in bed. I even stopped going to the toilet and had to pee into a portable women's urinal. It was a difficult pregnancy, and then I developed preeclampsia, so I had to have an emergency C-section, and my babies were born prematurely at 25 weeks. When they took me down to see my babies, I thought I was going crazy. There weren't just 5 babies. There were 6 babies. The doctor had overlooked one of my babies during the ultrasound, so we ended up with sextuplets. I guess you can imagine how happy my boyfriend was when he got the news. For him, having sextuplets was much better than having quintuplets. But, more importantly, my boyfriend Neil turned out to be a great dad. Today, our babies are 1 year old, and taking care of them requires my boyfriend and me to work as a team. Unfortunately, though, we don't have our own TV show yet. We contacted more than 20 TV networks, but none of them wanted to work with us. But Neil and I already have a new plan. We will start our own YouTube channel and show our crazy life with sextuplets. We read an article about this 8-year-old boy, Ryan, who is one of the most successful YouTubers in the world, making $20 million per year, and he even has his own line of toys. It's so crazy. I also started watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and the more I watch it, the more I want to be famous myself. I know how stupid that sounds, but wouldn't it be an exciting and fun life? Well, I guess that becoming famous is even more important to my boyfriend Neil than it is to me, so I'm sure he will figure out a way to make it happen. But whether we get famous or not, I'm already happy with how things are. My family is absolutely perfect.
I grew up in a loving home with my mom and dad. For so long, everything seemed great. Both my parents loved me, I got good grades, people at school liked me, and I was even dating a cute boy named James. I mean, honestly, I was kind of living the dream. And then I entered high school. I started drifting away from my mom because she started being secretive and weird. She quit her job and I never found out why. When I asked, she got teary-eyed and walked away from me. Some nights she slept on the couch. And some nights, I even caught her up in the attic, moving old boxes around. It was really confusing. By the time I was a sophomore, I could hear her and my dad fighting with each other every night through the walls. It made me feel unsafe and super uncomfortable. One night, my dad left for a business trip. I hate to say it, but I was relieved. My dad was my hero, and when my mom acted weird, he was there in ways she wasn't. But him being gone meant no more fighting, so I was excited. Or should I say, I was excited for about an hour. An hour after he left, I heard the front door fly open and heavy boots rush into the house. I crawled out of bed and walked downstairs to see the absolute last thing I would have expected. There was a man standing in my living room, helping my mom frantically drag boxes out of the house. I couldn't breathe. I didn't even know what to say. I had never seen the man before in my life, and my mom was crying. When my mom looked up and saw me, she pulled me out of the house after her and tried to force me into the man's car. I started screaming, demanding to know what was going on. My mom said we were leaving. She introduced me to the man, John, and told me that we were going to stay at his house for a little while. John put his hand around my mom's shoulder, and I gasped. Mom, cheating on my dad? Is this why she had been so weird this whole time? I tried to get out of the car, but my mom and John blocked me, keeping me trapped in the back seat. I started screaming for help. I didn't want to be a part of my mom's infidelity at all. Then, headlights shone on the house and the car. My dad was home. Apparently, he didn't go on his trip. The look on my mom's face was pure terror. John slammed the car door on me, closing me in, and then my mom and dad fought. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but eventually the cops arrived and dragged my dad away. From that point on, my life was a nightmare. The cops took my dad for being aggressive during the fight, but I honestly felt bad for him. Before I knew it, I was living with my mom at John's house. And I did not like John at all. He didn't try to get close to me. He barely even talked to me, but he was all over my mom constantly. He was basically obsessed with her, and it made me super uncomfortable. My mom explained to me that she was sorry, but this was what was best for us. I told her I just wanted to be with Dad, but she just wouldn't listen to me. Every time I tried to call him, my phone wouldn't go through. I didn't understand where he was or why he wasn't answering me. This went on for a couple of months. I spent most of my time with James, my boyfriend, but even he thought the situation was sketchy. He told me he had weird feelings about John. John had even warned him to be careful around me or bad things would happen. That sent shivers down my spine. I was just trying to keep my sanity in this insane new world. One night, I woke up to music playing in the front yard. I opened the window to see my dad standing in the grass, blasting music out of his phone and telling my mom and I to come out. I tried to run out to see him, but John stopped me in the hallway. He grabbed me and threw me over his shoulder, pulling me, kicking and screaming back into my room. He held the door so I couldn't get out. My dad walked away after John yelled at him. I didn't understand why, and I was so hurt. Every time I tried to talk to my mom or John about it, they would fight with me. I was fed up. Things with John and my mom got worse and worse. It felt like it was all about them, and I was just a burden. When they left for a business trip, I was honestly relieved. For once, John was decent. He gave me the keys to his car and told me to just relax by the pool all week. Of course, I invited James over to keep me company. We had a great time together. One day, I decided to dip in the pool and relax. James didn't swim, but I think he definitely enjoyed the view anyway. But about halfway through swimming, I started to feel horrible. My vision was blurry, and my stomach was throbbing with pain. When I looked at my hands, they didn't even seem like mine. I tried to stay above water, but I started to completely black out. The last thing I saw was James's panicked face. When I woke up, I couldn't believe my eyes. I heard beeping all around me, and doctors that sounded panicked. I touched my face and realized there were tubes in my mouth, and there was cloth over my eyes. What had happened to me? Had I drowned? Had I had a seizure? It was then that I realized how much pain I was truly in. My insides felt like they were on fire. I tried talking or crying, but I couldn't. I had to just lay there until I finally knocked out again. My life was like that for days. I couldn't see. I could only hear as I drifted in and out of consciousness. At times, I could hear James at my side, reading to me or telling me he loved me. Then it would be my mom and John. Honestly, having John nearby made me wish I would just pass out again. On one day, I actually heard my dad try to enter the room. Him and my mom got into a massive fight. She was screaming at him to get away, and he said that with me injured, I needed both of them to work together to help. My dad was right. There's nothing in that moment that I wanted more than my dad. It took about 2 weeks, but finally, I was starting to feel stable. The doctors unwrapped my eyes and kept a close look on me. My vision was garbage. I could still see, but it was like I was looking at the world through dirty glasses. The doctor sat at my bedside and told me the truth. I had been severely poisoned by someone who put a chemical agent in my pool. The coma I was in and the seizures I had meant I was going to have to learn how to walk all over again. My skin had burns all over it, and it was going to take me years to look normal again. I started to cry. I felt like I was a monster. Then the doctor asked me who would try to poison me. Was there anyone out to get me? Anyone who had influenced me to get into the pool? Immediately, my mind went to John. He told me to relax by the pool. He made sure I did it while they were out of town. And this whole time, he had wanted my mom, not me. I was convinced it was him. When I confronted them with that, my mom told me I was insane. John had tears in his eyes. He swore he had nothing to do with it, but I saw through him. He hadn't wanted me in his family at all. He had just wanted my mom. So much so that he took her away from my dad. So much so that he was willing to poison me. I was so mad. I told the hospital that they weren't allowed to see me anymore. I told them the only person I would see was my dad. Unfortunately, he didn't visit. I tried calling him, but my number still wouldn't go through. For weeks, it was just James and I. I had to go through painful surgeries. I had tubes in almost every part of my body, and I couldn't even walk myself to the bathroom. The doctors even had to shave my head for one of my surgeries. It was horribly embarrassing. And once I was nearing the end, James stopped showing up. I went to my physical therapy appointments alone, with tears in my eyes. When I texted James, I got no response. When I looked at his social media, I realized I was blocked. Just like that, I was completely and totally alone in the world. Or so I thought. I really lucked out with my physical therapist because he was a hottie. A smokin' hot babe of a man. His name was Miles, and when he saw me crying, he wiped my tears. It wasn't long before we were hanging out after physical therapy. My hospital stay was coming to its end, and I realized I had nowhere to go. I was freshly 18, my mom had cheated and run off with a guy who tried to poison me, and my dad was absolutely nowhere to be found. I'm not proud of this, but for a few days after my release, I slept in the park on a bench. I went around different fast food places desperately trying to find work. I eventually got 2 jobs at 2 different fast food spots so I could make ends meet and afford an apartment, and thank God I did. Some of the things I saw while I was living in the park were not okay. The whole time I was in the park, my mom was desperately looking for me. She kept calling me, but I knew she wouldn't leave John, so there was no point in even bothering with her. Once things calmed down, I tried to talk to the cops about getting John arrested, but they kept telling me there was nothing they could do. They didn't even think it was John, which was totally insane to me. I was heartbroken, but as time went on, Miles was there to help me. He saw me at my worst, and he was there for me through all of it. He moved into my apartment, and for a while, my life was stable. I would get random, creepy calls from my mom and John every once in a while, but the horror of him trying to poison me started to fade into the background. Then I got some incredible news. I was pregnant. After all I went through, I was going to have a baby with a man who loved me, and everything seemed right in the world. Except I still felt like I was missing something. I knew I didn't want my mom involved with the baby, but I definitely wanted my dad involved. When I was about 7 months pregnant, I went on a mission to find him. I visited all the old places he used to go. I called all of his old friends. I even went to my old house and asked the owners if they knew where he was, but there was nothing. I started calling all the hospitals trying to reach him, and that's when I really started to worry. Had my dad been hurt? Was he homeless now? Finally, I called the last hospital on the list, and they told me that he had been in their custody for over a year. But it wasn't a normal hospital. It was a psychiatric hospital. Had my dad been so torn up about my mom cheating, he had lost his mind? I drove over to the hospital as fast as I could. When I saw my dad, my heart broke. He was skinny and scared looking. When he saw me, his eyes lit up and he hugged me. We talked about the good old days, and he rubbed my belly, telling me how proud he was that I was going to be a mom. I told him I wanted him to be a part of my life and asked how he ended up here. He told me my mom had had him committed after she cheated on him and the doctors wouldn't let him go. I couldn't believe it. I promised him I would sign him out. He had raised me for almost my whole life. Now it was my turn to repay the favor. I told him he could come live with me. When I signed him out, the doctors tried to tell me not to, but I didn't listen. I know my dad, and I knew my mom was the real crazy one. My dad slept on the couch of our house, and he helped around a lot. He cleaned the dishes and cooked, and all around he seemed kind of normal. But whenever I mentioned mom, he would get really upset. He took my car every night to drive to work at his job as a janitor at a local school, and having him around was a dream. Him being gone at night meant Miles and I had our own private time. But soon, Miles was eager to have him out of the house. He told me my dad creeped him out, and I didn't quite understand it. Miles told me my dad had said some weird things about family to him, but I kind of brushed it off until I couldn't anymore. One morning, I got in my car and it smelled disgusting. The back seat had empty containers of what looked like bleach. My heart was pounding, and I knew something was wrong. When I tried to pull out of the yard, a cop car pulled out in front of me. They put me in handcuffs and put me in the back of their car for questioning. I was so confused. Being 8 months pregnant at this point, I was terrified something would happen to my baby. When the cops sat me down, they were actually nice to me. They explained that there had been a cluster of poisonings in family pools around town in the past month. Poisonings just like the one that had happened to me. They hadn't happened in years, and suddenly, with my dad's release, they were happening again. I didn't want to believe it. My dad wasn't a murderer. He didn't poison people. Why would he ever want to hurt me? He could never do something so horrible. But about an hour later, the cops pulled my dad in, and they were carrying evidence behind them. My dad had poisoned the pool of a house right by the station, and they caught him red-handed. When they brought him in for questioning, John and my mom showed up. I was so terrified and confused that I hugged my mom. She cried and explained the truth to me. She hadn't cheated on my dad. My dad had been threatening to hurt her and me for years. When she left in the middle of the night with John, it was because it was her only chance to escape. I had been too young to realize how abusive he was to her. The cops finally got the truth out of my dad. He had poisoned the pool and I in an attempt to bring our family back together. He thought the tragedy would make us a family again, when in reality, it tore us apart even more. When he was released, he started doing it to families' pools, hoping it would make families more united and closer together. The logic made me sick. For the first time ever, I saw my dad for what he was, a sick, sick man. He was sentenced to jail for a long time, and I even testified against him. My mom and John are both in my life. I gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and although life has been weird, I'm thankful to have my weird little family.